HORA. It's the hour, it's a dance, it's a village in Iran, it's a branch of Indian astrology, it's a Sri Lankan tree, it's a Faroese sex worker. It means to tame in Hausa, it means openness in Vietnamese, and now it's a performance and talk series produced by the legendary artist colony Yaddo, continuing Yaddo's mission to support diverse artists of all disciplines and welcome all into its orbit. I'm James Hanahan, author and artist, and it is my great pleasure to entice you into HORA. And now, Ringmaster Kat Rodriguez will begin the festivities.
Hello everyone, this is Kat Rodriguez. I'm so excited to welcome you back to HORA. Thank you for joining us, whether you are a tried and true Yaddo audience member or you are figuring out what it is, trying to make a connection, or just want to check out what these amazing artists have to say. Bienvenidos, everyone is welcome here. We have really exciting guests again today. The first is Olaiya Olayemi. Say hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing very, very well. How's Philly?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Glad to hear it. And our second guest is Stephanie McKee-Anderson. Come on.
Hi.
Hi. And how's New Orleans?
Hi.
New Orleans pretty good. Pretty good.
I want to start by just asking you both to tell us a little bit about your artistic practice. How would you describe your artistry and how'd you get into it?
Sure. I describe myself as an antidisciplinary artist. I work in the mediums of performance, sound, film, video, and writing. And I think, I wanted to be a writer since I was a child, and so it really started with the love of literature and writing. And then over time, it sort of evolved into experimenting with writing for performance and performing, and then screenwriting and video and sound-based work. And so it sort of has just blossomed and bloomed and continues to expand over time, actually.
Stephanie, what about you?
Well, I tell people all the time that my first language is dance. So even though the company that I work with, Junebug, is historically been connected to theater, my medium that I come out of is actually dance and movement. But I've also, just been really excited about how the marriage between all of these worlds happens. And I think that's largely through my influence of urban bushwomen, where, all of the forms are kind of come together in this beautiful experience. I like the idea of creating experiences for people. And I play a lot with creating, I think, this tapestry of both memory and sound. And, I like to think of all of the senses. How can it be this visceral experience for the audience members as they turn around and they come through this? I'm very much influenced by street forms that happen in New Orleans. So in particular, New Orleans Second Line, or those kinds of processions. I'm influenced by those things, both in the content, in the form, in the invitation to the audience to be a part of that. What does the invitation look like? What are people invited to do? How is it inferred? How do they just know? And I'm influenced around how this sort of full body experience actually pushes up against things like audience fatigue that we experience on the inside of like any type of traditional space that people come to see a theater. And when you're doing something that's a full body experience, fatigue and time move differently. And so I find myself just curious all the time around these forms. It's exciting for me to play in them. And to be influenced by them.
Amazing. So we have two people who, well, Olaiya, you're saying you started with words, and Stephanie, that you started with movement. And we have two folks who are blending in a variety of media into their what makes up the performance, but also the ways in which they're thinking about it. And I wonder, Olaiya, if you could talk more about your anti-disciplinarianness and how that might be a challenge, an invitation, both for the audience, but also for you and your artistic practice. And we're going to watch a work of yours. And when I watched it, something that was very interesting to me was the texture and the layering. And I wonder if you might have something to say about that mix into anti-disciplinarian.
Of course. Yeah. Anti-disciplinary is sort of a recent moniker that I took on. I've always been interested in my adult life, at least, in the ways that, the art forms can mix together, but I'm also interested in like creating new art forms. And the video piece that you saw is from a larger performance piece that's called the subtitle is a remix of my name. So I'm interested, at least in the last couple of years, I've been interested in remixing and what does it mean to remix forms? What does it mean to create new forms? I call this piece that the video kind of was inspired by a biomyth performance art piece. So I'm inspired by biomythography. What does that look like in performance, and what does sound and movement look like? And maybe not necessarily choreographed dance, but what does improvisational movement look like? What does vocal sound, how does that operate outside of the typical role of a singer? So I'm always interested in just how to like push the art forms and at the same time make new forms and question what virtuosity looks like or sounds like or how it shows up, and how can other people kind of see themselves in the work as well, and how can they maybe build their own worlds and call them something different, and so that's sort of how it really kind of shows up, the anti-disciplinary aspect, at least in my work.
Stephanie, what about you? Do you, now that you have a mix of media within your work, and I know obviously, also you're the executive artistic director of Junebug. How would you describe your work in those terms? Are you, like Olaiya, pushing against this kind of categorization, or do you find it helpful in describing the way you work, how you work, what you work in, with whom?
That's a good question. I find other people have more difficulty describing it more than I do myself. And it's whatever I want it to be, each time, it's like whatever I want it to be that time. I'm exploring different things. And in lots of ways, this moment in time for me, because I wear both hats, is a bit of a discovery of myself. A bit of I'm learning that there actually is there's a particular type of voice, and there is like a couple of things that can become associated with how I do it, but I'm still very much discovering that. I think the thing that I use the most when I sit down and I describe the work is as sometimes site responsive, even when it's on the inside of a space, it's responsive to that space because this is a unique space. We'd be remiss if we did not respond to the things that are shaping and that are very glaring and very in there. We embrace that. I think in a whole, like there's a historical essence of memory, of place, of belonging, of family. And sometimes I love the of your using Audre Lorde's biomythography. As I'm getting ready to delve into something just like that, like it's definitely inspired by my own experience, but it's not necessarily about, it's sort of my imagination of all the things. And so I love that. But, we kind of take people through an emotional discourse. Sometimes it's an Epicurean experience. We play around with different things. And that excites me. I don't necessarily like there being any kind of, I love like coming back and surprising everybody in something completely different. So I don't know what to do with those titles. I guess I am pushing up against them. I don't like them so much.
Sometimes they're helpful and sometimes they're extremely limiting.
Yeah.
I love that you're both finding, room to play within them and outside of them and
in between.
Exactly. Both of your praxis, it seems like, are very much concerned with sensory and sensual experiences. And Olaiya, I saw you nodding your head emphatically as Stephanie was talking. What had you so excited and being in the amen corner, saying yes?
Yeah, I think the idea of like site responsive and site specific really stood out to me, and also like the fact that my art is what I say it is. Like everything that I do kind of has a subtitle, so it's not necessarily the same every time. I definitely related with that a lot.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because so many times there is a particular form that people tend in a box to turn, especially when it comes to Black artists. They tend to push us into a particular box. I'm finding that more and more. And it's nice to not have that for yourself, to be like, this time I'm exploring something this way. And staying true to the creative process, because sometimes even in the creative process, things don't come as easily or quickly as they did maybe for another piece, right? So you really are responding to things. Like I'm always thinking about my relationship to this creative piece. So what does that mean for me? Like this thing that I'm in right now and thinking about really just revealed itself to me after about a year and some change. And it feels, sometimes I have to say, I wonder if it's I don't think it's self-indulgent. I just think it comes when it comes,
Mm-hmm.
Because we're carrying so many other things. One Saturday, I just sat down and it was just like, whoa, this is what it is. I picked my phone up and I started just typing stuff in and didn't necessarily edit myself, which I think is good. And it shows some growth for me, because I used to edit as I was trying to write it, and that's crazy. And so now it's just like, I just went first thought, best thought, get it all out, and then come back and look at what it is. That feels exciting when it happens, and I'm hoping that I don't have so much of a dry spell anymore, but this has been a hard year. So I think, a year and a half to figure out kind of what you're exploring is not bad.
Yeah, it's been a hard year. And also I firmly believe in, things simmering. Simmering in the back. So you're working on it, even if you're not working on it, it's in there. It all goes into the gumbo of what it's going to be, right? Olaiya, I want to turn to you and to the artwork you're going to share. So you mentioned the specificities that go into generation, and I want to ask you to introduce this piece and to perhaps touch on what were some of the specifics that you had, going into it, and then when we come out after watching it, I'll ask you a couple of follow-up questions. But I'm just curious, what did you start with this piece that we're about to watch?
Yeah, so I started with the text, and so I needed to know the story of this character or player or entity, whatever we want to think of it as. I don't really always think of my characters as characters, but this individual, I needed to know like what their story was. And so it started with the text, as most things with me starts with. It starts kind of on the page. And then I knew I wanted it to live as video. And it's a very watery piece. It's a very fluid, flowy piece. And so I knew I wanted to be at the beach. I knew it was an initiation ceremony. I knew I wanted to be wearing all white. I knew I wanted the presence of an altar. I knew I wanted improvised sort of gestural movements, more of a movement language than any kind of choreographed sort of piece. I knew I wanted a voiceover, and so I just kind of knew the like ingredients, like you said, the gumbo ingredients, and then I just needed like someone to help me film it, which I found, and then you just kind of put the ingredients together and cooked up a pot. So what you see is the finished pot.
I
In
love
this
it.
iteration, there might be future iterations that might be different, but in this particular video, it's a moment in the piece of initiation.
Flip-flops and dirty socks, fried fish, Cadillacs and bucket hats and gold teeth, baby hair and box braids and bantu knots, lightning bugs and mosquitoes, showers with no curtains, houses with no doors, collard greens and hog mogs on the stove, biscuits and honey on the table, the Mississippi moon bright and big in the sky. These here are my people. The home place. The women here have a shimmy in their hips. Their hair is kinky and coily like mine. They have a poetry in their laughter. They let their breasts freely fall and don't care about no bras. They don't care about being on time, for they do things on their own time. And they whine and whine their hips. They smack their lips as they eat. They snap their fingers as they rock to the beat. They be wild women. Families sit under cherry trees on colorful quilts and eat cornbread drenched in sugar, butter, and honey. Mothers wipe maple syrup from their children's faces. They gently pat their children's shoulders and tell them to go into the house. I am who I am because of the people that I have come from. I walked towards the water. They all stood before me. My grandfather Samuel, as fiery as Shango. My grandmother Willester, as sweet and soft as Oshun. My mother Michelle, as fierce as Oya. My great-grandmother Helena, as protective as Ursula Dantor. All of them waiting to greet me and meet me where I am. Not afraid to come to the shoreline, unafraid of going to the margin where I live. They smile and wave. I walk toward them. Great-grandmother speaks. We come here on this night in this place to stand on sacred ground and dance. To name that which has been unnamed. Here on this land we were unnamed people, so we renamed ourselves. We come to give thanks to the Creator who breathed life into us, to have our skin illuminated by the moon, to be shaded by the trees. We come here to be singing and praising, calling out all of the names of the dead and the living and the unborn. We speak life back into the broken and bent. We speak honor on those who went before us. We come full of cadence and rhythm and melody, wet and heavy with stories. We come to pour libation on the ground. We come here to celebrate. Our girl has returned home. They wash my feet, my hands, my back, until I am whole again. They help me put the broken pieces of me back together again. A warrior's welcome. I have been thirsty for too long, hungry for too long. Now is the time to drink until my thirst is quenched, to eat until I am full. I have battled enough demons, been through enough. Now's the time. I will put myself first. Love myself first before anybody. I have been too sweet for too long and let other people's bitterness clog my throat. Now's the time to speak and only surround myself with love. They lead me into a temple. It is like walking into a seashell. Sounds of crashing waves reverberate off the walls. It's a dark place, a warm place, a soft place, a wet place, a sticky place. Reminds me of a place I was in before. Reminds me of an old home, a place I was before I was born. This here is consecrated ground. This here is remixed ritual. This here is the opening of portals. This here is the gathering of kinfolk, both living and dead. They lead me to a giant tub, or maybe it's more like a whirlpool. They pour coconut milk over my head. They adorn me with shea butter to soften my skin. Florida water for scent. Aloe to heal my wounds. Cocoa butter for all the bruises. I see a million black bodies dripping with honey and coconut milk. I see the sky crack open in front of me and a bright light seep through the darkness. And I heard someone call me my name out loud, not jokingly or seductively. Someone called me out loud and claimed me. They called me. They called my name out loud, and she looked just like me. Was it God or a mirage? I am suddenly outside again. I am wearing a fresh white smock, and before me is a feast. It was one big party. 10 million voices filled the air. They seemed to come from everywhere. Some spoke in languages that were not recognizable to me. Others were very familiar. Some whispered, some cried. They were all my ancestors, welcoming me into my true self. What glory is this? What holiness is this? The bodies gathered around me. These bodies are free and unfettered. They move with ease. They play. These are unbothered bodies. Bodies meant to do more than work. Bodies that find joy in stillness or in motion. Black-eyed peas, green beans, macaroni and cheese, all line the tables in 2s and 3s. Sweet cornbread and sweet potato pies, and freshly cut watermelon and lemon pound cake and banana pudding, hot water bread and buttermilk, endless pitchers of lemonade and sweet tea, fresh peaches and papaya. There's so much power in my name. Even the ancestors wouldn't utter it. They kneeled down before me as I passed and spoke a language I couldn't understand. They looked calm and relaxed, like they had been living in paradise. Women dressed in white emerged from the sea. These women wrote stories on temple walls, made shapes and sounds and songs with their voices, were silent when they needed to, broke down when they wanted to, held their heads high with dignity, and fire danced under Mississippi moons. The fine lines under their eyes held histories. The stretch marks on their stomachs were rivers of memory. These here are my people. I am who I am because of the people I come from. I gathered the pieces of myself and took them down to the river. All the pains, all the pleasures, all of me, and laid them out for Yeye to see. Lit a candle, left some oranges and honey for her, and sat there waiting for her to show me a mirror of myself, to show me my true self, the self I am without the pain, the self I am when I am full of pleasure. I walked towards the ocean. Mother, hold your arms out to me and take me in your embrace. Let your waves wash over me. Wash all of the dirt and grime. Wash away all of the buildup, all of the heartache and the disappointment. Wash me, Mother. Wash me and leave me clean in your wake. I met her on the shoreline at a sandy beach. I was able to salvage her somewhat, the me I used to be. She was ragged and worn, her glow was tarnished. She was a tarnished dream on a tarnished chain. I was able to dust her off, put some light and life back into her, make her laugh and lollygag. We stepped into the ocean together, me and her, swam out to see what we could see, where the mother and daughter meet. Ocean and river, together again, down in the dirty Mississippi Delta. I walked into the water, waves rushed to greet me. It was hard to tell my flesh from the sea foam. The ocean wrapped itself around me like a shawl. I had been lost in the jungle for so long, wandering in wilderness. No one soothed my soul. No silver sounds could break through the silence. I was all alone, out here on my own. I am looking for new songs to sing, new movements to make. I am rewriting myself down by the river. I walk to the bottom of the sea and grow gills. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. A bright light explodes right in front of me, a breaking open. Salt water fills my lungs. This here is a rupture. This here is a riff. This here is a rapture. A million unnamed women, black as molasses, surround me. They got gills too. I am in the middle of the circle that they make. I am a black girl in the middle, in the thick of it, but I ain't scared. I breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Breathe and float. I breathe and swim. I backstroke with all of my cells. I shimmy and shake with all of my cells. The women surround me, whisper to me. They say, welcome child, welcome home. Deep in that dark sea, I found my pearl of pleasure. It was sitting there waiting for me all along. The child within me is released. She finally comes out to play. Doves appear and lift me into the air. I am finally flying. No bullshit to weigh me down. I was once a fragmented thing. Now I am floating, fleeting, a fledgling, a new thing.
That's
Beautiful. So beautiful. So Leia, you
Thank
mentioned, of course, you are so welcome. Thank you for sharing with us. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that this piece is an excerpt. It's part of a greater whole. What is it? What is that greater whole that you were, that this is excerpted from, and what were you exploring within the piece?
Yeah, in this piece, as I said, I was exploring kind of the idea of initiation and family and ancestral memory. I think the piece in and of itself is going to eventually live as a performance installation that sort of combines movement, sound, video, and text, an image-based installation. So I think that that's going to be how it's going to exist. And the video will be a part of that sort of installation. And it sort of evolved from just kind of sort of a free writing exercise, and then an idea, and then I kind of thought it would be a solo thing, and then it sort of evolved then into the video form. And but I think the bigger whole is as the installation for sure.
In the piece, you describe it as a kind of remixed ritual. When you say that, are you thinking the different elements that you're bringing in, as you've been talking about? Are you referring to the use of Yoruba ritual practice, that it's accompanied by the kind of spoken word? What for you is the nature of this remixed ritual, and why remix it?
Yeah, I think for me, when I think of sort of the different African diasporic spiritual traditions, that exist, I think of them as remixed, as combining, the European sort of influence and the indigenous influence. And I sort of wanted to definitely draw on those as well as in African indigenous spiritual traditions. And I wanted to sort of kind of combine different things that I was inspired by. And so I think the remix is in the remaking of an initiation rite.
I love that. There's a kind of, I don't want to say reappropriation, but yes, and a kind of not just coming into one's own agency, but taking it. And thinking about what you just said in the context of the line of to name that which has been unnamed. And it strikes me that it's not to name that which has not been given a name, but rather to name that which has been unnamed. Can you talk a little bit about the significance of that for you, of this naming of self?
The character is a trans individual, and as am I. And so, as trans people, we rename ourselves, but then I also was thinking about just as Black people coming into the new world, adapting to new languages, and in my family we have many nicknames. There's all these names for one person, and so naming was definitely a theme and is a theme of the bigger work. And so I was thinking about, how do you name something that has no name? There's so many different iterations of names that we've gone through as groups of people. There's so many different indigenous names for trans people. There's so many indigenous and diasporic names for queer people, and what is in a name, and what is naming, and what does it mean to call yourself by what you want to call yourself by. And so I was sort of thinking about all those different types of namings. And so this person kind of adopts a new name, which is Ado-Ori, and they become more themselves through that naming of self, and through that realization of their family lineage and ancestral history. And so that's kind of how naming plays a part in it.
Stephanie, I know you mentioned that sight was important to you, and we're going to watch the art piece that you want to share with us. But I'm curious what your responses to Olaiya's piece might be, and if there are any threads that you see running through that work, and perhaps some of your own.
Yeah, I mean, well, my first response was, "Oh, I see why Kat wanted us to be in conversation with one another." There are so many threads of pieces between us, even down to some of the things that are actually said in the piece. So it's really wonderful to see things in call and response to each other, and they don't even know each other. But it's interesting. The idea of work that is, sometimes people refer to it rooted in ritual. I don't like to say that. I actually like to say that it's work that we feel not only spiritually connected to, but a spiritual responsibility. And I think a spiritual calling to do the work in some instances. It's so much bigger than us. It's so much bigger than us. And diaspora goes a long way, like it is brought to us from the folks that from Africa, but it lives on in all of the practices, particularly Southern practices, that they don't even know that they're carrying this on, but it lives on in these deeply Southern practices that are here. So in that way, we are so connected. I wrote down, it's so important, the role of the 21st century griot. That's what I really saw. And in lots of ways, I hadn't thought about that until I sat and I said, that's what it is. This is another griot. There are people who are responsible for the holding of stories and telling of stories from spaces they didn't even know they knew. You know what I mean? We're sharing it with people, some of these things. So I wrote that down. And I wrote, we must dream in colors and pictures and sights and sounds and smells. It was so beautiful. It felt like just like the wave really felt like it was like washing over me and making me new, just as I was watching it and seeing it. So it was really, thank you very much for sharing that. The piece that I have is also like it's an excerpt. It's an excerpt from a larger piece called Gomila to Return, Movement of Our Mother Tongue. And this is one standalone piece that's in it. And we thought about that year that we were doing this. We thought about what would it be to have a standalone piece. And so this piece is reimagined as a video piece. With some aspects of what the performative piece is, but I do like the idea of reimagining things and giving it back to people. But it keeps the integrity of both color and of sound and of movement and of movement, even in the play of words, which is what I love as well with words. And I'm not necessarily a writer, but I have the benefit of working with some very talented spoken word artists.
Yes.
And I just love how, to me, I see movement in the words, how they play and the inflection and how they just jump off a page, to me is very exciting and it's very inspirational. So yeah, I'll talk more about it after you show it. Yeah.
Say we want to bring back black. We want to bring black back. We want to bring ancient thoughts to present thinkers so future generations can be healed within a moment. Time stands still or ceases to exist, but then a minute by man's standards is a mere blink in the master's eye. Or who can master time? Who can move mountains? Who can make music that makes motions that move us forward to bring us back? Yeah, we want that black back. We want that good news that renews that old time religion. It was good for my ancestors, so it's sure enough good enough for me. That take us back, that back bent spinal spiral, a cosmic swirling, a whirling dervish twirling a double helix like dance of sacred energy, molecular memory. This is music's beginning, the magic of morning, recalling ancestral tones that make you remember things you never even knew you knowed. No, English ain't my first tongue. Where I come from, forms are born in a nothingness so divine. It encompasses everything here. Spirit speaks from the deep, and women see with 16 eyes here. Everything has an answer. Love, bring back love, bring black love, bring back black love, bring back black love. No matter the question, love, no matter the time, love, no matter the question, love, no matter the time, love, no matter the question, love, no matter the time, love, no matter the question, love, no matter the time, love.
Also gorgeous. Thank you so much for sharing. Can you tell us more about? So you said that this was originally a performance, and then you created another thing that was specifically for video. What in the process of that adaptation or decision making? What did you want to convey in this video? Why was it important to have the elements that made it into what we just saw be the thing that was shared in this format?
Well, it's interesting because the person who actually created is Kyoko McCrae. She's actually really responsible for this video version of that. And Kyoko had the idea that she was inspired by the word, like me, the words just jumped out to her. She had visuals for that, the way that the word playing. She had visuals for it. Well, because it already had sort of it already had a little bit of the things already in the play. So it wasn't a whole lot more that needed to happen other than with, looking at where and how that was set up. And I want to say that Kyoko mentioned she wanted it to be like approached as though it was a music video, right? And was important for the colors. I was blown away when I went, whoa, look at these colors on this thing. This is really beautiful. But it still had an essence of some of the things. So you saw the essence of Orisha on the inside of that with Kai as Oya with the machete. And then it had an essence of, again, of Jeremy, who's dancing in the very beginning. There's a lot of the street dance, and you also heard the soundscape of a New Orleans second line in the background. So that all becomes sort of our playground, if you will, for us. It's how we are, we're inspired by not just the sounds and the sights, but of the words. And I really think that poetry, in my estimation, is one of those forms that's like jazz, right? It's just like one of these just beautiful forms that is, free flowing, and then you find yourself, and then you can riff, and then you can come back to something, that there's something that exists as sort of this undergirding for you. I'm really inspired by that. The piece itself, Gomila, going back to that, really was about an interrogation of one thing. It started out as a question of, what does the modern day auction block look like for Black people? And what lessons have we learned? Like, what would they be thinking as they're there on that auction block? What memories would they have? That's what we started interrogating. And after we started interrogating that, we made it more specific to New Orleans. That became clear that New Orleans was the place that this, that a spiritual reckoning would be happening, right? In New Orleans. And that would make sense, as New Orleans is like one of the largest ports. And as in lots of ways, there is a cultural reckoning that's happening in New Orleans right now. We wanted to make those connections clear. And we felt like the people who were really monitoring that spiritually, holding that space, were all women. They were represented as Oya, as Yemaya, and as Oshun. A lot of the most powerful deities that also ruled over us during Katrina. So we felt like Katrina was the reckoning that needed to happen, like everything was washed away and made anew, and other things would begin. But but everybody has to be. We play a lot with this. Everybody has to come to that crossroad. New Orleans, Louisiana, was at this cultural, spiritual crossroads.
There's such an openness of spirit in the piece, and the insistence on love. And it's I'm from New Orleans too, as you know. I'm from New Orleans too, everyone. And so you know, this piece for me, it's so home. It's so New Orleans. So to hear you say, you know, you arrived at that through process is interesting to me. And you've spoken about, you know, the importance of specificity of place. Of course, this is New Orleans, but there are also a couple of really specific places in it. I caught, you know, the visual of the tomb of the unnamed soul, the unidentified. Is it the unidentified or the unknown slave?
Unnamed slave, yeah.
Unnamed slave. The levee, of course. Could you talk a little bit about the landscapes that we see and why these specific landscapes and this specific work?
Well, you know, again, I'm missing Miss Kyoko McCrae, so I'm giving my impression of it. Noted. As I see it. These were all areas that we turned around and we looked at, and that we talked about at various points. The tomb of the unknown slave is so important. It is connected to St. Augustine Church, which is in the Treme area in New Orleans. Treme area is like one of the oldest Black neighborhoods, heavily gentrified now, and is, I think, responsible. It's like the footprint. It's like when the first people stepped off the boat and they landed in New Orleans, whatever that footprint was so strong and so clear and so precise that it never left. And so New Orleans, in lots of ways, is like a bit of a throwback. You know, it's kind of European, but it's way Caribbean and way African as well. And so that church is still standing and still functions in the Treme. And that became a really important space for us to explore. These are only, just really a short walk to Congo Square, which is where slaves would gather on Sundays. They would sell their goods, but they would also dance. They would also drum. This would happen there on Sundays inside New Orleans. So, you know, I don't think it's accidental that this area is kind of the cultural hub of New Orleans. And I know that Kyoko was trying to make that connection known, right? To show the street influence, the second line, and also the remixed versions of these things. Like, to me, poetry is the perfect form to make clear the connection between New Orleans and Haiti and Africa. It's the perfect form because it's so dense. How could you possibly tell that story if I were to put it in all of these words? But somebody who's really, Sonny Patterson is amazing, is so talented with making clear the connections between all of those places. And more importantly, even though it's told through a New Orleans lens, we make it clear this is not just New Orleans. Just like, you know, issues with levees and flooding and even hurricanes or any other natural disaster are not specific to New Orleans. New Orleans, I think, is ground zero for a lot of things that we see that happen in other places. And it's important for us to not be so dismissive of a space, but to actually learn, right? Because when the moment we turn our heads and we think that that's just those folks right there going through this, is the moment that it makes clear that that connection is actually to all of us. So to the degree that we fight for the liberation of folks that are here in New Orleans, we fight for everybody's liberation.
Olaiya, I'm curious, you know, Stephanie was seeing the synergy between y'all, and I'm curious, after watching this gorgeous excerpt that Stephanie shared, what your response is.
Yeah, it was gorgeous. I love Sonny Patterson, so I was like, oh, But yeah, I mean, the poetry was just gorgeous, and the movement, and the textures and colors, and the kind of almost jazz-like editing. And I like the fact that it was thought of as like a music video, and it was just really gorgeous. And I felt like I was transported to New Orleans, and so I can't wait to go to see these places in person and feel the energy in Congo Square and these other places. So yeah, thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I think it's just so interesting, the idea of memory, um, that is shared between um, both of us as artists. And yeah, I'm like, whoa, yeah, look at how I was like, we were like in call and response to each other, really. um it's really deep. Like, I wasn't, because I didn't get a chance to watch it prior to, so when I watched it, I went, what? Well, no wonder. Like, sometimes with matchmaking, it doesn't necessarily work all the time, but this is a pretty good first date.
Oh, good.
Good
Good.
first date. Yeah.
Here's hoping there are many more in New Orleans, perhaps. Y'all call me when you get a beignet. Absolutely, though, Stephanie, what you're pointing to in terms of memory and even remembering, I think that I know after Katrina happened, it was basically the question that always came up, when I said I was from New Orleans was, were you there, during, in italics, the storm?
Yeah.
And of course, that was a tragic event that was exacerbated by a really um, uh, lethargic, racist, classist response on the part of the government, which of course we're living every day today during the pandemic. And also, there's such a spirit of strength and resilience in our beloved city. And I think the video that you shared, especially the insistence again on love, I take as a kind of spiritual remembrance, right? That of course, even though this is a site of trauma, that there's also that means that it's also a site of great strength and of great humanity, overcoming. So I love that, in the video too. And it occurs to me that, with this work, there's a mirror lifted up to New Orleans itself, and not just in a like, ain't we pretty, don't we have good music and good food, which of course everybody knows we do, but also, to see deep, as you were saying, to really see oneself.
And specifically, like, looking at and honoring like these deeply Black and Southern aesthetics, which have value,
Mm-hmm.
they have value. And to be unapologetic about that, and to know that that in essence is about love. It's not about anything beyond that. This is about love. That's the part that I really love about that, is that this is at its deepest point. This is about love for us, love for each other, all the different aspects and the diversity of Black life as well. Like, we don't have to be one thing. We're many. We're not, a monolith, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
showing that diversity is really important. And then honoring deeply Southern aesthetics are also important, as that is an extension of the diaspora.
I love the affirmation and the self-lovery in the work is so beautiful to see, precisely because it is a running, inward, without forgetting, right, the context and the surroundings. And you've both named how that's so important. And Olaiya, of course, in your work, you have the kind of litany of names, of folks within your family, and the memories, the food, the places, the sounds, the practices, So I see that, in both of your works. And let's not get it twisted. It's not uplifting. It's not elevating. It rather, it's deeply affirming. In a world that so often tries to negate Blackness. Stephanie, as you've mentioned, the kind of attitudes towards the South is another thing. So I thank you, both for your works of art. Thank you again, both, so much for sharing these incredible works, which are so affirming, and also have allow us to enter into, I think, new relationship with place, with people, with memory, and even ourselves. And I'd like to know if you have any final thoughts, having witnessed the works of each other, or if you'd like to share with us what's next.
I think the idea of remix and remixing form, just all of it, it was a gorgeous thing to witness, just making conversation. Yeah, and what I have next is I'm going to be presenting some sound-based work through Brooklyn Arts Exchange as a work in progress showcase with another artist on the 19th. So look out for that. And if anybody wants to follow me, my Instagram is Capricorn1089. I post, if I'm teaching a class or if I'm doing some art-related thing, I post it there. But yeah, this was a beautiful gathering and conversation. Thank you for having this. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I am always excited when I'm in a room with other artists and I'm able to just be my artist self and talk about the work, because there's so many other things that keep me busy and pull me away from that. And I just get really cranky and crunchy about it. So it's nice to be able to be in that and to dream and to also be witness to someone else's work and to be able to talk about what I see. It's really a gift. It really is a gift. And we should make more time for things like that, just artists to be in conversation with each other about our work, about what we're exploring. It helps us gain a better sense of ourselves sometimes. And so I think it's a really beautiful thing. What does Junebug have? Oh my God. So our 40-year, talk about remix, our 40-year anniversary was 2020, but now it will be from 2020 until whenever I say it's over.
That's right.
We'll celebrate till the wheels fall off this thing, but we'll be having a couple of things. By the time this airs, I think Junebug will have announced that we will be extending. We had a fellowship for artists. As you can tell, I was deeply influenced by Junebug's effect on me as an individual artist, as a practicing artist. And I've kind of continued that to pay it forward. And one of those ways is in a fellowship for 5 artists here in New Orleans, the John O'Neill Cultural Arts Fellowship. And we give, this is a no strings attached fellowship, and creating space, much in the same way that we're here and talking about our work and showing work. There is no, they do not need to show us a finished work. This is about really helping them as artists to be able to support themselves as they're doing their work. We know that artists will always do their work. So each one of them receives a $20,000 award from Junebug, and we couldn't have thought of anything better to celebrate 40 years than by giving back to the artists that have helped support Junebug and make it possible for us to be here. That fellowship is going to continue at least, we got word, for at least another 2 years. So I'm excited about that. And we'll be celebrating, we'll be having a 40-year anniversary gala, virtual gala, that will happen sometime in June. So stay tuned for that. All this information can be found on our website, www.junebugproductions.org. And you could also follow us at Junebug Productions on Instagram.
Oh,
Yeah.
amazing. People over product always. Thank you to our two beautiful artists for joining us today. And thank you watching for making it through the end of this video. And I encourage you, please, 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 to check out Olaiya and Stephanie's work and the work of Junebug. You know where to find them. And thanks again for joining.